I know, it's the rare occurrence of me without a hat. I guess I don't need these anymore. I did my audio check. Oh, man. Okay, so the heat is returning to the Seattle area. And I know some of you who are in like naturally hot climates are going to be like, please, you don't know what you're talking about. For Seattle, it's starting to get hot. All right. Anytime we start cresting into the 80s, I don't do well. I'm not a hot weather person. So hot for me might be different than hot for you. And especially if you're in like Texas, Arizona, something like that, totally get it. But still, it's hot for me. All right. It's hot for me. And it's been humid. So it feels hotter than it actually is, because normally our summers are pretty dry and warm for most people, not hot, but last few years has been a bit different. Let me see. A couple things I want to talk about. I talked to my friend Jason over at Redfish Bluefish yesterday, actually, and we're gonna set up some time. I think next month at some point, we're going to sit down and kind of do an interview talking about some of the kind of lessons he learned running his fish store. As many of you know, like he's closed down his fish store, or is closing down still, I think. He's kind of not shipping right now because of various reasons, but there's a lot of things like we were talking about where lessons learned and things you wouldn't have expected walking into running a fish business that I think would be really interesting to talk about. So we're going to do a little sit down and talk about his experience, his perspective on things, what he would maybe do different if he were to, say, be starting over now as opposed to what he did with his previous online store and his in-person store for a while too. Plus, just my buddy. I just want to go see him. So kind of make an excuse. But yeah, just one of the things we talked about. And then, let's see, I'm working on trying to get some other stuff around the fish room done. A lot of like planting, and stuff like that. I've just been busy with a couple of different like interviews and some other, health related things. So members of my house got sick, and thus, I had to do extra taking care of people, or just trying to not get sick myself, because being sick while you're trying to find work is not fun, right? So yeah, been busy, did a ton of stuff today, feeling hotter than Hades. I had an interview at 7 a.m. Was a little rough, but that's what happens when you interview with people on the East Coast. They're like, yeah, how about this time? I'm like, oh, that time sounds great. Cool. They send the invite over and you realize they're talking Eastern time and you're in Pacific time. And you're like, right, should have specified. All right, let's get into the topic. Are smart aquarium devices actually a problem? So more and more that we get technology kind of coming our way, it's very slow, let's be fair, compared to a lot of other industries and even maybe the saltwater side of the hobby. But more and more we're seeing higher levels of tech, or at least minimal improvements of tech, applying to a lot of our equipment in aquariums. And so this would be things like, we're starting to get smarter heaters. And the great example would be like the new Seche contactless heater, the one that is controlled by a phone app, the Fluval 3.0 light, the Chihiros lights, any of your app controlled lights these are things that we would consider like smart technology. There's supposed to be a number of different attempts to add levels of automation to your tank, like the Felix system when it was being worked on, or if you look at like Apex controllers in the saltwater side of the hobby, these are ways to try and add smart technology to a lot of the equipment in our hobby. But the question is, are they actually a benefit, or do they present more problems than they're worth? So let's start as I usually do on some of the positives. You guys know, like, I'm a tech enthusiast. I work in the tech industry, so naturally, um, I'm going to be a little more pro certain levels of tech. However, there are things that I don't like. So, as an example, I like the app controlled lights because I feel like when you if you design a very good light like the Fluval 3.0, the Chihiros lights, the AI Prime lights, then you can just add extra software that basically keeps that hardware effective, but the software adds more and more control or more options and effectively expands the capability of the light. And this is an example where, and I think it was mentioned a little bit in chat, where it depends on the approach to how the technology is brought into place. So in this case, it's not that we're trying to add more and more weird, crazy hardware things. We're adding additional levels of benefit through software, but the hardware itself can, in theory, not change for quite a while. And because this isn't something that is absolutely necessary, like your filter or your heater, to where if something goes wrong, it is absolutely catastrophic, I think it's a little safer to have the additional points of potential failure in some of the smart features. And what do I mean by that? So, like, as an example, if you have a power outage, right? If you were to have a smart heater, do we know if it automatically remembers all of its details when it powers back on? We know something like the Fluval light forgets what time it is. And it just assumes that when it returned to power, it is midnight or like 0 hour, right? And then it runs whatever program it was on from there. So it's still kind of doing its job, but it's out of sync and it's all messed up and it's wonky. But with a light, we don't really care that much. Your light could be off schedule for like a week and it really won't matter, right? It's very minimal impact to the aquarium, other than like you might have if you're pushing high levels of CO2, and that's on a different smart controller, that your CO2 might be running when your light's not on, and thus increasing the levels of CO2 to a potentially dangerous route. But I would hope if you are going that level of tech in your aquarium, you have like a fish sitter if you're away or something like that, right? So that it's not going like a week like that. It's only going, say, a day. And a day is usually not so bad that it's going to really cause problems. Aquarium domain. The only thing worse than those early East Coast meetings is when your West Coast clients schedule those damn late afternoon meetings. I don't mind those, dude. I used to take meetings at like midnight at one point when I was working with a team out in China. So I don't know. Those don't bother me so much. Anyway, back on topic. Here's where, so I think there's level to be positive because we can, in theory, with software controllers and levels of smart technology, make a simpler piece of equipment do more or be more customizable and configurable so that we can, if we care about it, if you're like a control freak, you can really dig down and get exactly what you're looking for to happen in your aquarium, theoretically. Nature loves to not cooperate with us and tell us that no matter what we thought we were going to do, it's going to do something else. But we can set up things to potentially achieve a specific result. Here's where it starts going crazy. Here's where I think the negatives are. When we start looking at more critical pieces of hardware, filtration, which we don't really have a lot of smart filters yet. I mean, there are some in like the Seche line has a number of different app controlled things with their app, but it's not as widespread in filtration quite yet, unless you're using something like an Apex controller, and then you're controlling a lot of different things. But in theory, you have a number of different like probes or ways to gather data to help inform those controllers on what they should do, rather than where I think some of the cases are. And I'm actually interested to try one of these. I might have to get one of these heaters soon. Something like the Seche contactless heater. I know that a couple of channels have been advertising it very heavily, but there's just something in me, and maybe it's like the skeptical product test mentality, that what happens when it loses sync with your phone for a long period of time? Or how well and how certain are we that the controller in that thing is going to be any more robust or accurate than the controller in your non-intelligent heaters that we see break down all the time? Like there were big faults in a lot of old Marineland heaters at one point, and it was all about their controllers, where they would basically stick on and catch fire potentially. Or what we have seen in the not just Aquarium Co-op, but Aquarium Co-op's design heater, that they had this kind of square ones where the controllers would fritz out on them and they would just die really, really quickly. How can we be certain that the controllers being used in these app-controlled heaters are any more robust? Now, they give a 5-year warranty. That's great, but there were warranties on numbers of products, and they've still had very high failure rates. So when we start talking about these really critical things, like a heater, like a filter, this is where I feel that some of the smart tech starts to become a problem. Because unless you don't have some kind of backup controller or alert system or something built in to very quickly tell us as the user when a problem is occurring, we run a lot of risk. So, like, let me give you an example. Let us say that we had a smart filter of some form. How do we know that this smart filter is aware of a leak? Now, with a non-smart filter, that's the same thing, right? We don't know. It's not aware of leaks. So if some leak is happening, whether it's in the tubing, something's not anchored down correct, a seal has an issue, and it's leaking water all over the place, that's the thing. But we're paying more for a lot of the smart technology. Like, as an example, that Seche heater, let me see here. Let's go to, like, say, Keep Fish Keeping, so KG Tropical's website, right? Because I know they sell Seche stuff. Scuba contactless heater. So a 50 watt, right? So, 10 to 20 gallon heater. They say 10 to 15, but yeah, I mean, you could use a 50 watt in all sorts of tanks, realistically, as long as you're not pushing the heat too hard. Is $43 before shipping. So if we're spending $43 on a heater and it's supposed to be smart, we are expecting a certain level of extra benefit, because just being able to control and see the heat from our cell phone is not really that great, right? You know what I'm saying? I don't think that's as impressive. And yeah, like the 100 watt heater is like only $3 more. I think the 150s only an extra like $10 or something like that. But just as an example, right? These are not cheap heaters. This isn't like your $25 heater, your $20 heater, etc., that you might be more accustomed to. I mean, even as an example, one of the most probably popular heaters out there, you go look up. I have to remind myself the price on a. I swear, Amazon, if you do not function, thank you. It's like Eheim Jaeger, right? A 100 watt Eheim Jaeger. So we were at $42.99, so it's like $45.99 for the 100 watt is what Stephen P is telling us. A 100 watt Jaeger, which is considered one of the most reliable heaters out there as far as its cost, is $23 on Amazon. So you're paying double the money to add app controlling. And when you add app controlling, you're adding a layer of risk and potential failure. In my industry, we call this a point of failure, right? So you're adding more complexity to the device. And the more complexity we add, regardless of what the warranty tells us, the more likely a problem is to occur. This is where things get kind of wonky, because in this particular case, we're talking about one of the most critical things in a tank. Because if that heater, for some reason, thinks that it's only 70 degrees in your tank, or its temperature controller sticks and it just stays on, how much of the smart technology is going to help us and realize that that is actually happening and alert us, compared to if we were to instead buy that, say, Eheim Jaeger for half the price and then spend an extra like $30. Yes, this ends up being more expensive. I understand that. But now we get a temperature controller like an Inkbird, and now we have a probe in there that we know is significantly more accurate because it's designed to do the one thing. It's not something that is a small temperature controller and taker built into the rest of a product. That's all it does. It reads temperature and it turns something on and off depending on if it's in the range it wants to be. Right? Now, getting alerts, as Josiah is saying, I think getting a temperature alert if things are outside your ideal parameters is a great thing. If things weren't working so well, I would consider getting a pH controller. I'd be curious why you're going to a pH controller when we're talking about a heater. But pH controllers can be very useful, let's be clear, depending on what you're trying to do. Most people who use pH controllers are typically injecting CO2, and they're using it to monitor and control the amount of CO2 injection they're doing. But yeah, so getting back on that, right? How do we know each of the alerts or whatever is built into it is robust enough to handle certain types of failure that the heater would encounter that makes it worth that extra cost, whatever you want to call it, value, etc., compared to buying maybe a more simplistic heater and putting it on something like a temperature controller, right? That's where I think some of the smart tech is not as great for the hobby. Now, long term, we'll eventually get to a point of, and there are some heaters like this, I think Aquatop makes one, if I remember right, where they have a separate temperature probe and controller that controls the heater, and it's not built in directly in the heating unit itself. It's a separate piece. And I think that's actually a smarter like design of tech if you want to go to a more pseudo-intelligent device. But we're going to see more and more of these things, and the real question is to what level, and we've been talking about a lot of product quality stuff lately, and that's just because it's kind of like one of my passions, so you'll have to forgive me, folks. But how do we know the level of testing that has been conducted on these? Now, I will say, Seche in general makes fairly good products, and I generally would say I trust, quotation marks around trust, that Seche would do a reasonable amount of test work and engineering for their products, compared to like if we were talking about something randomly made by one of the big Chinese manufacturers. I'm a little less trusting when it comes to them. And part of that reason would be we see so many of the products that are out on the market right now, whether they're under, random name AQZYP Aquatics or whatever that you see on Amazon, or whether it's something that is used as a product and white labeled in by a number of stores because it gets them a very nice entry level product for a number of people, right? How can we be as faithful when we've seen so many of those products have high failure rates as far as we're concerned? If we looked at like the discussion on the 5% failure rate for some of the products that Aquarium Co-op was keeping. And there's other, it's not just them, right? There's lots of other places that are using a similar piece of equipment. I had a number of comments from like people in the engineering field who were like, 5%, that is ridiculous. Like anything above 0.01% is unacceptable in my industry, right? These levels of failure that are considered acceptable in certain industries, and maybe that's just they're acceptable because that's what makes them super cheap, are not acceptable in others. And when we see these higher levels of failure rate, we're starting to see more and more complication and smart tech introduced into our pieces of equipment. How can we have the faith that they have been robustly tested and engineered so that they are more robust, etc., than any other piece of equipment we're using? And that's where I think the benefit, right? As we talked about, some people love automated fish rooms, having like auto water changes. Maybe you're using automatic feeders, things like that. Convenience is wonderful. The ability to, like, on my phone, control every fluval light that I have in a room is handy if something happens, or maybe I decided I wanted to make a change and I want to apply it to every tank. I can do that relatively fast, right? And that convenience is very nice, rather than going over and on a physical controller, all right, I got to dial in this and that, and okay, set it back up. Now I got to go to my Wi-Fi controller and change the timing that it's on if I was going for specific timing, especially stuff like that. Stephen P., when I think of high-quality semiconductors, I think of Higer. If you think of Higer, sir, I'm sorry. I know that's sarcasm. I know. Puffer's rule. P.S. That empty tank is still driving me crazy. Put fish in it. Yeah. But it's so easy. If I put a stuffed fish in there, is that okay? If I put like a plushie in there, will that chill you out? Because it is a fish. Sort of, kind of. Why is Bentley's head naked? Hi, Paul. The short answer on that one is I've been doing a bunch of errands around the house. I am god awfully hot. I've been sweating like crazy, and it just feels comfortable to not wear a hat right now. Also, I left my hat downstairs when I came up here to kind of get ready for stream, and then I was like, oh, I've got to stream in like 2 minutes. I'm just going to leave my hair and deal with it. Flatbed and cowboy. He didn't say what kind of fish. Okay, so that's kind of my spiel. I want to talk about it. I want to thank several of you for participating. If you have a question at this point, feel free to fire them. At Bentley Pasco is the easiest way for me to see your questions. For those who have it, I know that does not work very well on mobile, which really sucks. YouTube should get better at that stuff, but yeah. Empire of Dirt. Is Higer going to branch out into airplanes and automotive? I mean, they might be a supplier for Boeing at this point, just given some of the issues Boeing has had. Okay. I think you guys will find this funny. So I saw a quality assurance role over at Boeing, right? And then I looked at it and I laughed, because what the quality assurance stuff they do is not what I do. I'm a software guy mostly. But I do know a guy who is one of the plane inspectors, but he works on a very specific line. Then I got called by like 4 different recruiters, all trying to get me to work the same Boeing job. And every one of them, I was like, I'm not interested in working for Boeing. I'm not interested in working for Boeing. Just, nope. No, I'm good, man. I'm good. And just, I'm good. Aquarium domain, the dream team, Higer components, Boeing quality, and Microsoft software. What could go wrong? Hey, plenty of Microsoft software is much better than a lot of other competitors that are out there on the market. Until you start getting into like fully customized software solutions. Yeah. Regina Phillips. Bentley has hair. I figured he was bald like several fish tube dudes. No, I have hair. It's just I like wearing hats. I dress so boring with like plaid shirts and khakis most of the time. Occasionally shorts now. I just got comfortable and lazy. That hats are like my way of expression. They're kind of my one thing. But that's just because I've been dressing like this for so long, and it's just what's comfortable to me. I'm Boeing. All the Boeing safety inspectors better be new people. Well, part of the problem, and how do I say this without what we have seen in reports on the news is allegations that the safety inspectors are being forced by much higher up managerial persons within Boeing to falsify records or pass things that they otherwise would not pass. And when that's the case, and I've seen this in my side of the industry too, when I was working on some products where one of my bosses told me, even though we know this is a failure, I want you to mark it as a pass because I made an agreement with the engineering team so they would stop seeing XYZ and freaking out about it. And I responded with, you want me to lie about the health of the piece of equipment I am testing for their ego? I said, yes, I made an agreement so that they'll do X, Y, and Z. And my response was, when is the agreed SLA, so service level agreement, of them fixing the problem? And he didn't have an answer for me. I told him, if you are telling me directly that I have to do this, I will, but I will have a note in every single report that there is a known failure, and we are marking this a pass with the understanding that the known failure is otherwise still in place, and that is an agreement made with engineering, not by QA. And my boss was not very happy with that response. But then I went to his boss, and his boss then tore the engineering people apart. Because I don't like to lie to make people's ego feel better. If your baby is broken, your baby is broken. You need to fix the goddamn thing. Sometimes you got to play hardball. You got to play hardball. It's not fun, but you got to do it. All right. Man, it is. I will say this, like, summer in aquatics sometimes is one of the worst. I was doing some work in my fish room, and my fish room was like muggy and hot. I was just like, oh. It's just it made 15 minutes feel like an hour and a half. Brian P, I came in late where controllers discussed. Yes, briefly. In the sense that I am pro controller because they're more dedicated devices, and they're basically only controlling, whether that's through the use of probes to gather data and thus on-offs like a temperature controller, a more simplistic device, so that you're using a more dedicated and better calibrated and usually less likely to fail device, rather than trying to integrate everything into one and adding layers of failure potential rather than just one. You have 3 from Felix Smart. I can't say anything positive about Felix Smart. I really can't. I think it is extremely overpriced for not enough capability. But whatever. They're trying, I guess. Or we're trying. I don't even know if they're still working on products, are they? CoroWorks. My new job won't let my password be over 20 characters. Really? I mean, in the tech industry, I would think that, limiting password length is really bad. I was lucky and got in early, great deals, but not looking good now. Chipboard issues. Yeah, so I've heard a number of problems with the Felix devices from people that had them in hand, and a lot of it. I remember talking with the Felix people in 2019, and I introduced myself. I told them what I do for a living. I said that if you ever need someone who literally has a testing background to help you, all I ask is send me a device, and if you can, give me either a software that connects to it that lets me put it into effectively dev mode so that I can see what's going on in the background, and I'll happily sign NDAs. I'll do it for free. I'll basically be a free consultant because I would love to see devices like that be effective and work. I never heard from him ever again. So yeah, what do you do? Try and offer literally a professional to do a job for them, and they're like, nah, free labor? We don't want that. But I can kind of understand. As someone who runs a YouTube channel, I would understand not wanting those things. But yeah. I hate getting new jobs because all I see is security flaws everywhere. And safety issues when I train. I mean, every place has some kind of security and or safety issue. That's just the norm. But yeah, that's what it is. Henry Rothschild, if you have more than 10, 20, 40, 70 tanks, what do you think about auto feeders? I know you like hand feeding so that you can watch your fish, but I watch my fish all the time. So my question to you, Henry, would be this. If you watch your fish all the time, why would you need an auto feed? Just at the time when you're watching your fish, feed them. Here's where I think auto feeders can be a problem, and this is a personal thing. This is my personal take. If you want to have an auto feeder on every tank because it helps you because you have so many tanks, understandable. Your power draw is going to be real fun because that's just excess power all over the place. And it's one of those things where I think the cost to install the auto feeders, most auto feeders actually require a bit of maintenance to prevent them from clogging up or having issues. Plus, you have to go through and load them, which takes time. I feel like the amount of time spent keeping the auto feeders doing their thing, plus the additional cost, actually isn't worth it compared to just feeding your fish by hand. That's my personal take on it. Even like the best auto feeders out there over time, because they're exposed to moisture and all sorts of things, require cleaning, require extra work. Plus you're reloading them, probably once a week. Maybe it's every 3 days, depending on the amount of food going into your tank, whatever that rate is. And often I feel like you're almost better off just doing it by hand in the first place. Because believe me, when I feed my fish, that's when I spend a lot of my time watching them. And sometimes I will just go into my fish room and sit and watch some of my fish, or I'll sit when I'm in my living room with my wife or brother-in-law James, or having dinner, I will just sit and watch fish. We actually got I can't believe I didn't mention this at the start, but like I got 2 new adopted dojo loaches from somebody who's moving and had to shut down their aquariums. And yeah, my wife was so happy. She loves dojo loaches so much. And the second she saw like old dojo loach and new dojo loach just kind of noodling around doing what dojos do because they're very social. Oh, she sent me pictures. She was so happy. It was like, I know. Because I travel, okay, perfect reason to have an auto feeder. I'm not home all the time where I can feed on a regular. Once a month I reload, clean the units. Okay, so yeah, if you only need to reload like once a month, I'm assuming you're dealing with lots of small tanks at that case, Henry. And because you travel a lot, as long as it's monthly, like I'm used to dealing with rainbow fish. Rainbow fish are big pigs. You have to feed them quite a lot. Well, you don't have to, but it helps to feed them a lot. So in my case, Also, because they splash like crazy, they would gum up them damn things once a week, probably, knowing my luck. So for me, auto feeders are like the devil. But if you're somebody who travels a lot, like maybe you're on the road a lot for your job or whatever the heck it may be, then totally understand wanting to have auto feeders because it puts that, how do I put this, sense of security that you know, just like having automatic water change or something like that, that when I'm on the road, my fish are still getting fed and they're getting fed a measured amount. And that might be the other important thing to note is that one of the benefits to an auto feeder is once you kind of get them dialed in for each tank, they're always going to feed this very measured amount, which is really nice, right? So you know that you're not like, oh, yep, I got a little too aggressive in feeding by doing it by hand, which is a problem that I occasionally deal with, but that's because I spoil my fish and my systems can handle it. So I don't usually care. But in that case, I think that's the perfect case where I would suggest auto feeders for people who travel a lot. Like having an auto feeder while traveling, totally understand. Totally understand. For me, I'm not a big travel person. I don't travel a whole lot. So I usually have someone at home whenever I do, like brother-in-law James, and he knows like, oh, I just feed this amount to all the fish. And I empty the dehumidifier once or twice a day, depending on the time of year. Summer, it's like twice a day. Because Lord, does it get hot in that room. Woo. Yeah. See, perfect example. Like, I think that's where little bits of automation are great. I like automatic water change because it's one of those things where, thankfully, where I live, water is not terribly expensive. We get very, very clean water. So having automatic water change basically just puts a little at ease in my mind that I'm constantly lightly diluting my water so that in theory, I'm keeping my parameters regardless of what randomly might happen working. Atkins at Nature Aquariums, why don't you have your dehumidifier tied to a drain? Okay. Good question. Because I don't have a proper like dedicated fish room in the sense of like where I'm doing all sorts of automatic water changes and I have drains and things like that. I didn't want to drill a hole in the wall of my house to go outside. I just bought a unit that I have to empty by hand. It doesn't bother me. It's most of the time it's only once a day. It's only like about a month and a half in the summer where twice a day is reliable and it's basically in the morning and at night. It takes me all of like a minute. It's really not that bad to keep on top of it. It's pretty easy. In a like more dedicated fish room, I would actually use an air exchanger because that maintains heat or it maintains temperature to where you want it to be, not necessarily specifically heat, because in hotter summers, you're trying to keep cool air, you're moving air constantly to keep it fresh, that thus prevent humidity from building up. It's nice and beneficial and more effective than a dehumidifier in the grand scheme of things because you're not necessarily drying out the air as more as you're keeping a happy medium where you want it to be. Plus, it's fresh air all the time, as opposed to constantly fighting with your air and heating your room up with a device that yanks moisture out of the air. The more tanks you have, the more the cost balloons and becomes unachievable. Okay, hold on. So, Mitch, this can really be extended to the entire topic. How many tanks you have is, in my opinion, the critical question. If you have one or two tanks, automation makes sense far more due to costs. The more tanks you have, the more cost balloons and becomes unachievable. So I would say there's an opposite to that too. And let me explain. I think in the case of using like smart devices that are more expensive and more costly, or using really expensive things like Apex controllers and things like that, I would agree with you. There is also something to be said for levels of automation like automatic water change systems, that the amount of time saved if you do it correctly versus the not titanic amount of cost and effort to put it into place really becomes worth it. And that's a matter of just gauging, like, what's your time worth to you? For me, if I was at, I'm at like 15 tanks right now. Water changing is really not that bad, right? I do one entire room one day. I do 2 tanks in my living room another day. And I do basically my big tank and my brother-in-law's tank, the retirement tank, this being the big tank, on another day, right? So there's like kind of 3 days where we do small periods of water changing. And at most, I'm really doing like maybe 45 minutes worth of work. It's not that bad. But if I were like in my garage where I'd be fitting somewhere closer to like 60, 70 tanks, now automatic water change is saving me a significant amount of time. And that time is worth the not horrifically expensive investment. It's more the time of setting up all the plumbing and drilling your tanks. But that time and effort saves me so much time in the long run that it becomes significantly more valuable to do that. Now, if we start talking about like, putting every single tank, if you have 60 tanks on a like smart heater, well, no, that's ridiculous. Just heat the whole freaking room, right? Have one thing that heats the whole room and keeps all your tanks at a level of equilibrium. And maybe you have a few tanks that need to be hotter, or heaven forbid you ever need to have a certain number of tanks cooler and use like a chiller. Then you apply that to only those individuals. And it makes it a lot easier because you're adding less power draw, so your bills are cheaper. But 2, you're also putting less risk to where you might miss one thing going wrong, right? Josiah, Dan's Fish has a Tenjo Bosemana. I need you to talk me out of it or say it might work for my 6.4 pH planted tank. I'm not willing to adjust chase higher pH. What is your GH? What is your general hardness in the tank? Rainbows in general are fairly adaptable to pH as long as you keep really good water parameters, but they do like some mineral content. So if you're at like GH4 or GH3 or GH2, you're very soft water, very, very soft water at that point. That's not enough mineral content, and they will probably run into some level of issue. But if it stays stable at 6.4, that is a little more acidic than they probably want to be, and occasionally you can run into some small issues. But as long as the mineral content is there in the water, usually most rainbows will adjust very well. What I will say to you is, rather than a Tenjos, there are some, like some of the Radnocentris as an example, or if you ever see them, there's the Cali Jacora. They're probably not going to be available to Dan anytime soon, but I know eventually the breeder who helps supply Dan is breeding them. Cali Jacora likes softer water. So that's a fish that would work really, really well in like 6.4 pH. But if you're just asking me basically to say 6.4 pH is a little lower than rainbows prefer, and thus you won't have to spend money on rainbows, then I will agree with that. GH3, I would not do rainbow fish. Not Bosemani. Some of the stream fish you might have a little more success with, but not Bosemani. Bosemani, you really want to have Bosemani at least about 140 ppm of general hardness is about where you want to be. They prefer mineral content in their water. Not a lot. We don't need like liquid rock, although they love that stuff. But you do need some level of mineral content present to keep them happy and prevent them from having some slime coat issues. Is one of the things that you'll encounter at low pH and low GH. Is they'll get this kind of like cloudy look over their eye, and it's purely in their slime coat. It's not actually any disease or anything. I've had this when I've had a pH crash ages and ages ago in a quarantine tank, and I saw cloudy eyes in all of these rainbows because my pH had dipped under 6. So, you know, but yeah, there's that. If you're trying to keep it where you are, yeah, I mean, look at something different. You might have some success with pseudomagills if you want to try those instead. Some of the radiocentris can handle that pretty well, but yeah, I would probably avoid bozemanite at that point. There was a question earlier about ropefish, and I apologize that we kind of skipped over that, but I want to come back to it. One sec. I'm going to get to you. I'm going to give you some love because I did see it and I meant to answer it. And then I went, okay, McMikey. Or maybe MC Mikey? Any first-hand experience with ropefish? No. I have secondhand. If you want someone who has a lot of experience with ropefish, you would want to go just... Let me give you a link. Hold on. Trying to remember if she's still got stuff up. That's Oddball Aquatics. She hasn't really done a lot for a while, although she's still active in the fish community. But she hasn't done stuff. She does like some TikTok things, but you would want to go see Miss Oddball Aquatics. She's a big rainbow fish person. I'll put a link here in chat for you. And just look up ropefish on her channel. She built a giant pond for ropefish. She talks about how to, she's tried breeding them, a bunch of stuff. She's very knowledgeable about ropefish, and she has a number of videos talking about them on her channel. I would argue that she is probably the best source of information outside of like some people that are not creators on YouTube, but are just natural scientists in the industry, as far as understanding how to have success with ropefish. Haley's got a number of videos on it. She loves them. She's a hoot of a human being. Yeah. Hope that helps. Although I probably will be doing ropefish in some semblance of the future because my wife likes the way they look, much like dojo loaches, and dojo loaches and rainbows and ropefish can basically live together. So we might have one of those in the future as a ropefish dojo loach nonsensical thing occurring in my household. We'll see. Nathan Hovey, would Colombian tetras get that cloudy eye thing like the rainbows? Potentially. It can happen to a number of different species of fish who generally prefer slightly more alkaline and mineral content having water. So if you start getting them into lower pHs or lower TDSs, they can run into those issues. Empire Dirt Aquatics saying Radnocentris are thriving in the outdoor barrel at 30 TDS, 6.5 pH. There you go. Rads are really cool. Ceres Creek, Tiwa Creek, they're two of my favorites. I know that Dan regularly gets them in. They're pretty great. They're great. They're just a smaller fish, so you can have more of them. But they're also a little more likely to leave their fry alone if they grow up inside the tank until you get to a critical mass of juvenile fry, and then the juveniles will pick on the fresh fry. But the parents usually leave them alone. So that's kind of a cool thing you can do if you want to watch rads breed inside your tank is try rads. To go back to that rainbow fish question. Johnny and Dan's Fish, we don't get them in often. Poke Marcel for us. I mean, I feel like Dan could just go to Marcel and be like, yo, I want some more rads. Hook a brother up. I mean, I can poke Marcel if you really want me to. I don't know how much he's going to listen to me. Feel like he'll listen to Dan more than me. I think it's just a matter of explaining that if you have demand, yeah. Are rads still one I'll get crucified for calling rainbow fish in a forum somewhere? I feel like... So here's the thing. They're in the club on a much more technical perspective than pseudomagills could ever be. They're just more niche. Because there's really only like the Radnocentris ornatus that is in kind of the club where it's, there's a million billion melanotanias, there's a number of glossolapises, there's quite a few chelatherinas. But rads are proper rainbows. And if you get a rainbow head who's going to beat you up over rads, they're just an asshole. I'm just going to be honest. They're just an ass. Most of the Rainbow Fish Forum group are quite appreciative of Radnocentris. Whereas pseudomagills are the ones that we like to give a little hate toward because, well, it's in their name. Pseudo. Yeah, they're kind of the weird kids in the corner, right? That's a good way to think about it. Adam Lash, Bentley, what's your opinion of Melanitania califitri relative to other Bozemanii? Hold on. So the problem is there are so many Cali X, Y, and Z's that my brain struggles to remember exactly what they look like. Oh, Gerd has a video of them. Interesting. We can bring that up real fast. Okay, yeah, I remember these. I remember this video from Gerd, especially, actually. So, okay, here's where it's weird. The males show what we would technically associate with Bozemanii coloration, right? That like split body. They've got a very deep blue to where it's almost like black, kind of like the Uters or Uter, because auto translate will make that look horrible. However, the females don't exhibit the coloration that we would normally associate with Bozemanii, which is probably why they haven't been considered a Bozemanii catch yet, because they have coloration that's closer to like the Susii, or like Calimoisi would be another one, where you see less of that kind of dullish yellow orange in the body that we would normally see in a female, and the silver belly portion, and you see significantly more color in the finnage than we would normally see in a female Bozemanii. That being said, they look a lot like a freaking Bozemanii. I don't know. They're very cool. If you could get a hold of them, they're pretty rare. They're not very common in the U.S. side of the hobby. So if you could get a hold of them, that's just cool. And having cool rainbows is always going to get you some love and credit in my book. So, yeah, take that with what you will. Dance Johnny from Dance Fish. I don't get the fight over the best Bozemanii location. It's pretty clear that Ajamaruensis is by far the best, but that's not a Bozemanii. You're right? You're right? All right. I expect more out of you, Johnny. I'm looking right at you. I expect more out of you, Johnny. I know you're just trying to trigger me. It's okay. It's okay. It's like this. It's like how I trigger Leo with this bad boy. It's all right. I expect more out of you. The best catch location for Bozemanii is the one that you have and enjoy. Ooh, that's right. Diplomatic answer. I like them all, honestly. Each one has different coloration, slightly different reasons to enjoy them. Some get bigger, some stay small for a lot longer period of time. Some grow slow, some grow turbo fucking slow. Whatever. Can appreciate and enjoy them all. They're all beautiful. Dumb, but beautiful. Tony Adams, this may be a dumb question. There's no such thing as dumb questions. Is it considered interbreeding if you have a tank with Melanitania Bozemanii Atinjo and Bozemanii Aves Creek? Yes, technically. So the coloration in the different catch locations is different. And because of that, we try to keep the DNA of the species separated. So when we keep them, we try, especially if we're trying to breed them, we try to keep them separate. Also, it's really hard to tell the females apart. So that's where intermixing can get really dangerous from a perspective of if you ever want to breed the fish. If you just want to keep them for display, who cares? Right? Who cares? But yeah. Rainbow fish are the craft IPA of fish keeping. No, they really aren't. IPAs aren't beautiful. They might be dumb, but they're not beautiful. They're all the same ugly hoppy nonsense. I don't like IPAs, man. I like the joke that people who like IPAs like being punched in the face before they can taste their beer. And that's not my jam. They're more like fine craft whiskey. Everyone's a little different, but in the end, we love them all, and we differentiate them for the stupidest reasons. Mickey M, I'll put it in chat for you. You want Callie, Jacora, or Annie Radnocentris ornatus? Bam, in chat. Jakora, Jakora. And then any of the rads, Radnocentris ornatus, regardless of their location, they all can do soft water fairly well. Fight me IRL. Bring it on. See, the problem with that threat, we're gonna get outside fish for a minute, my friends. The problem with the threat, this is a lesson that I taught a friend of mine years and years ago, before he went into the military, right? This is a guy who's very gung-ho, very much that guy who's like, I want to go and stop the problems and beat up the bullies, right? That mentality. I said, what's the biggest lesson that you can learn right now before you ever go in the military? And he's like, what? I said, never pick a fight with somebody double your size. And he's like, okay, yeah, why? And I was like, because you might be faster, but all the big guy has to do is get a hold of you. Because if I get a hold of you as a big person, and I just grab you and fall, trust me, it hurts bad. It hurts real bad. And I'm not doing any work. I just got to bear hug you and fall on you. It's the advantage of being a fat bastard. My fighting style is grab, fall. Nothing fancy. Don't need that anymore. I mean, I did years of martial arts. I know how to fight, but I don't want to. So just remember, if you want to fight about your happy IPAs or your craft nonsense beer, me and my buddy Bourbon Syndicate, Rusty, what's up, buddy? Good to see you. We'll talk whiskey at you all day long. Or in this case, because we're on the fish channel, we'll talk fish. That fall's going to suck for the person I fall on. They're going to break the fall for me. It's great. They take all the damage. They're the one eating concrete. I may or may not have used this tactic on a drunk person because he was being an ass. Work like a charm. Oh. Yeah, I would rather just sit down and talk about fish. You can drink whatever you like. I'll drink what I like. We can babble about fish for hours. It'll be fantastic. I prefer a diplomatic solution. Fall damage doesn't apply to nade jumping. All right, video games. Oh, man. Flatbed Cowboy. The Amica Splendens, Illidan's Furcidens. I've had them later for 3 months, still on the small side, I believe. They kind of grow slow to my knowledge. Oh, wait a minute. No. Jeremy, my good friend Aquarium Domain, you have those lyrics wrong. George Thorogood. Love that man. One bourbon, one scotch. One beer, not one IPA. One beer. Let's leave it open because some people are not really fans of the IPA. I'm not an IPA guy. If I'm going to drink beer, I like Weeders or lagers and some brown ales, kind of up my alley. And occasionally a pale ale. IPAs are too hoppy for me. I like more citrusy kind of things. That's why I tend to go toward like weeded stuff. So like your Hefeweizens and that kind of stuff. But yeah. Gorgachev, killifish versus rainbow fish guy. So killifish people, this is the joke that I love to say, just because killifish, for the most part, don't require a lot. So like some of the killifish people you'll meet, their tanks are literally like little shoebox plastic containers in a closet, and they've just got armies of them, right? It's like those reptile, like the snake keeper things where they have those big bins that they keep their snake in, and they have these nice organized racks. You can do the same thing with much smaller containers as a killifish person, where rainbow fish people are like 40-gallon breeder. Well, I guess that's an okay small tank to start. That's my nano tank. Realistically, I'd like to get a nice like 240. Rainbow fish keepers are the ones that are like, I want to go bigger and bigger and bigger. Because rainbow fish love that swim room. They're big, they're bold, they're in their face. They don't like to just like hide in a dark corner in a ditch like the killifish. The killifish keepers are like the quiet guy in the back of the room that you kind of wonder whether or not they're a serial killer. Where the The rainbow fish keeper is the loudmouth who never shuts up in the front. It's just the way they are. I'll take bird dog whiskey anytime. My mom loves bird dog. She loves the bird. Her favorite is the blackberry bird dog mixed with Sprite, which makes a damn delicious beverage, by the way. Creepy killy people with their shoeboxes in the closet. Hey man, but it's so efficient. It's such an efficient use of space. Oh, currently have Old Forester. Let's see what I've got at my desk. Yes, I keep whiskey at my desk. I just started on this. This is a local Seattle distillery called Copperworks. They do single malts, so not bourbon, but still single malt whiskey. But the cool thing is they're, for those of you who care, they have this like huge apricot flavor note. It's like almost the only thing I taste up front is like this big, beautiful, like fruity apricot thing. Like those little, if you're in Washington, you'll know these. There's little candies called cotlets. They're an apricot kind of like gummy, think kind of like the consistency of Turkish Delight that usually has like little powdered sugar on it or something like that. It's like those candies, but in alcohol form. It's so good to sip on. But it is a little young, so it definitely has some grainy punch to it to go with it. But man, the apricot on it's freaking amazing. Yeah, that's what I have. I love Old Forester though. It's delicious stuff. Want to come see my tank? Just come into my closet. You could keep killifish in a bag in your trench coat. I believe it. Lucas Bretz could do that. Lucas Bretz could be that man for you. How funny would it be if you met Lucas at a convention? I almost want to suggest this to him. And he was just wearing a trench coat. He came out to you like, want to buy some killifish? Just bags of killifish in a coat. Big bags on one side. Got the blue Gularis over here. And all the other weirdos over here. It'd be so great. Oh, I'm going to send him an email to do that. I bet Lucas would. Oh, man. Okay. I'm having too much fun and I'm going a little loopy because I got up way too early. Gang, thank you so much for hanging out, putting up with me. Next week, we might have a little bit more fun. So be prepared. Be prepared. As long as I don't get sick from all the other sickness that has been going around my house, we might have a little extra fun next week. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching and stay awesome. And also, you should probably be afraid of the people with killifish in their closet. Just saying. Just saying.